The final love letter to your family. I can't remember if that's exactly what Mary Hart's title was when she gave a presentation all those years ago. When she's the first one that introduced to me the importance of a revocable living trust. And that statement has stayed with me for 10 years. My name is Rich Lennon. We talk every morning about growing the money from 9 to 9:10 here over the summer. And if you are looking to grow your money, if you're looking to lend your money, then you are in the right place. And today we're going to talk about the responsibility of wealth and how a revocable living trust plays a part. Definitely need a sip of coffee for this. Tried to talk about this last week, and my Facebook Live never went out. So here we go. I'm going to do it again. I had another set of friends, and I didn't understand what they were saying when they told me. It took me a bunch of years to understand it, but they were talking about the responsibility in wealth. And their story was they were doing, I believe, direct mail for politicians. They were doing some direct mail for politicians, and they were raising money for the political things that they thought were important at the time. And the husband and wife team were sitting in a family room with a woman that they were trying to get to give money to the political organization. They were sitting there and they're having a conversation with them. And they didn't understand at the time what the lady meant either, as they told this story to me later. And what struck them and stayed with them as they tried to talk this elderly woman into making a political contribution is something that the elderly woman said that stuck with the relatively young couple at the time. And that was that wealth was a responsibility. And the couple, they didn't understand it at the time. They kind of took it as a rejection of giving the money to the political thing that they wanted. But this couple became a power couple and they built their own real estate empire and did very well for themselves and then created their own wealth and then reflectively looked back and began to understand what this elderly woman was talking about wealth being a responsibility. And of course, when they related that story to me, I didn't understand it at the time. And it wasn't until I had my own tenure career that I put together that wealth is a responsibility. And some people who haven't acquired that wealth might not understand that and might be a little taken back about that statement. But what that is meant by that is once you have accumulated wealth, you have to be responsible about the way you behave with it. And so that could be on the things that you do with it. That could be on the way that you spend it, or the way you leave it to your kids, et cetera, et cetera. But that wealth becomes a responsibility and in some cases even a burden. And so today I'm going to talk about that. I've been talking about passing a little bit more recently. I had a buddy who died a couple weeks ago, and it has impacted me, and it's made me rethink these types of things. And as we talk about wealth and growing wealth on this podcast all the time, I thought it only appropriate that we talk about the responsibility of said wealth in the form of a revocable living trust. So, long-winded way of talking about revocable living trust. So, Mary Hart put it very well, and she said that this is the last love letter that you leave to your family. And it defines the way that you want to distribute your wealth in an efficient manner. Too many times I see people who have created wealth and they do very well by themselves, but don't take this final step of getting a revocable living trust to make sure that their wishes are fulfilled when their ultimate passing occurs. And I would say that most real estate investors who purchased homes likely purchased homes at a discount because eventually it was inherited from someone else who put the sweat equity in to create the actual equity. And so having a good plan for your exit is extremely important. And the best way to do that is a revocable living trust. I just want to talk about that a little bit. So the revocable living trust is where you put all your assets. So you're the beneficiaries of all the things that you own, or the beneficiary of those things become the revocable living trust. It's living because you're alive, and then the trust becomes permanent after you pass. And that's why it's revocable, because you can revoke it and rewrite it. And as life goes on, you can change the distribution of the things that you want. And that's what makes it a revocable living trust. And then when you pass, you can no longer revoke it, and it just becomes your trust. And so in that revocable living trust, we talk about it holds your assets, but it allows you to dictate better than a will, right? A will is often incomplete. A will is also public, but by keeping things in your trust, you can dictate the way things are passed down. You avoid things like probate. In a trust, you don't have to go through probate. And so, an example of how you would use that revocable living trust is maybe your primary home is in a revocable living trust, maybe your automobiles are in a revocable living trust. Your beneficiaries of your LLCs should be in a revocable living trust. Your bank accounts, the beneficiary should be your revocable living trust. Your IRAs, just depending a little bit on tax strategies, I do think you can make an argument not to leave the beneficiary as a revocable living trust. So you can make that argument, you can make that decision. But some people will opt to have their IRAs beneficiary be the revocable living trust. And so it's more than just creating that revocable living trust, but now you have to implement it and you have to do the steps necessary to change the titles of the important documents in your life. But the revocable living trust, and if you have a spouse, you'll each have your own individual revocable living trust. So if you have a primary home, for example, it will often be split 50-50 between the two revocable living trusts. And most revocable living trusts, when one passes, all the power goes to the other person, et cetera, et cetera. So it doesn't bypass things like that. So the revocable living trust dictates out one component of the revocable living trust is a will, and the will is how you will dispose of not only your personal assets, your monetary assets, but it will have things in like who are going to take care of your children in the event that you and your spouse pass, et cetera, et cetera. Also important in that sequence is that you do things like you do medical releases and medical authority about who can make some of those decisions for you. These are all kind of wrapped up in that idea of a revocable living trust and that process. And it is super important that you do these types of things. I think that if you start to accumulate any kind of wealth, perhaps above a number as small as $500,000, you don't even have to be a millionaire to be considering a revocable living trust. They are a little bit expensive to set up. I believe that when I first set mine up, probably after listening to a Mary Hart presentation, I probably spent $6,000 or $7,000 to set up that revocable living trust. And then I probably spend about $1,000 a year to have an attorney go in and make sure that it is current and that I'm following all the rules and that following all the rules and any tax codes, for example, that might come up because those laws are always changing. Your revocable living trust need to reflect that and need to change with it. So it is always a document that's in process. And anyway, I've just been thinking a lot about the responsibility of passing, and I thought it only appropriate that we talk about growing the money, that we talk about the responsibility of that money once you've grown it, and the responsibility to make sure that you're giving it to the people that you want to give it to, and that you don't die intestate. And that means if you die even without a will. And I know that some real estate investors with a tremendous amount of wealth don't even have their wills set up. And anyway, it's when I hear them and I talk to them, it's hard not to get preachy at them about, again, that original conversation about responsibility. And that if you pass and you have not figured out how to distribute your assets, your heirs will then fight over your assets. And as a as a son who lost his father in his 20s, I will tell you that the passing of the matriarch or the patriarch in your family will be very stressful and very difficult. And things like money shouldn't matter in those times. So yeah, all right. I just want to talk about it and remind you and admonish you if you don't have that in place yet. It should be one of the biggest priorities. It will likely take you around 6 months or so to set it up. There are a lot of things that you have to think about and consider and make decisions about, like medical directives and who's going to take care of your kids, God forbid that you and your spouse pass, or things like who gets what assets when your generation is passed. So, all right, that's it. If you're interested in learning about growing the money, check out my website, richlondon.com. You can go in, you can download the Smarter Wealth Blueprint where I really lay out how to lend money and the strategies I use to do that. And then if you're interested, like hit the growth call button and I'm happy to chat with you. All right, I'm at 10 minutes, so I'm out. Everybody have a great day and I will see everybody tomorrow.